On today's episode, we are finally talking about the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. What is up, everybody? James Jackson here. I'm back again. If you're new to my channel, I give a lot of tips and tricks to the film and video making industry. So if you like the content we make here, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that like and hit the bell so you can stay up to date on all the content that we do here. This review is going to try to be a little bit different than most. Usually I take a lot longer with my reviews, but because of so many similarities to its little brother, the Pocket 4K, I personally just felt like I would be treading a lot of familiar water. So I'm going to this is going to be a roughly quick video, hopefully a roughly quick video. We'll see how that goes. Before I gave my review, I wanted to always give you guys just what it's like to actually experience working with the camera, not just reading off specs and comparing it to the Pocket 4K, which you guys have seen on my channel, commented and liked and hated the comparisons. But always appreciate critique and good feedback, and I love hearing from you guys, so there's always love from me. I wanted to basically put it out in an actual paid job and see how it works in the field. And I've shot a commercial video with this, and I've shot a wedding with this. If you haven't seen my review of the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, I'm going to definitely leave a link in the description below, as well as a card right about now, so you can sort of get an idea of what it's like to shoot with the Pocket 4K, because for the most part, the experience shooting with the Pocket 6K is roughly the same with a couple differences. Basically because the body is pretty much the same. All the inputs are basically the same. It still has the wonderful, great menu system that has been since their Ursa Mini days. One of my favorite, if not my favorite menu system for all time. Sony, Panasonic, even Canon, take notes. This is how you do a menu system. But same CFast, same SD card, still can run recording options 2 and SSD. Function buttons are the same. Pretty much everything's the same except for, of course, the mount and the sensor. And obviously the major impact that those two things have, both good as well as bad. So let's start off with the sensor itself. This is a super 35mm sensor. Because I don't know what to call it. It's not technically a Super 35. It's a little bit smaller than Super 35, but it's roughly in that ballpark. It's a bigger sensor than the Pocket 4K. It's a actual true 6K camera, and which brings a lot of features and recording options like 6K 16:9, 6K 2:4:1. You got a 5.7K for 17:9 DCI recording features. You've got an anamorphic mode, and you got a 2.8K recording mode, as well as your other DCI 4K, UHD, and HD recording options. So going over these specs, let's go over what I thought about the image quality in filming with this camera. And the image is stunning. It is absolutely stunning. It is breathtaking. I love the details that come out of this image, and both in the 6K RAW as well as the ProRes. Both are great, beautiful images. Blackmagic continues to do well with their color science. When I was shooting my my commercial video with this camera, I was shooting alongside the C200, and what was great about it is I was using this more to get more the detail, the B-roll shots, the details, because it was focusing on crystals, and crystals were the focal point of the commercials. Hold on a second. Yes? Do you want to come down? You want to come down? Come on down. So, This is my daughter. Everybody, how you doing? Is there yes? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Daddy needs to film. Do you mind, Dad? Can Daddy go back to filming? Why not? You miss me? Come here. Give me a hug. Yes. Yes, you're on camera. Mm-hmm. It's light. Go on. Go back upstairs. That was my lovely daughter, everyone. So that was interesting moment. Where the hell was I? Oh, yeah, details. The details of coming from the 6K sensor is breathtaking. I love it. I love, especially when you're doing B-roll shots, or you need to get, especially when you're have like a detail focus, or if you're focused on a fabric or some sort of mineral or some sort of texture. The 6K works amazingly well. This gives you so much. This does give you the flexibility to crop, gives you some extra details. One of the cool things that I actually like about this camera is the fact that even though it's not a stills camera, it's not a photography camera by any means, but it's also cool that you, while you're filming, if you want to try to create sort of like a photography shot, you can grab stills from the 6K image and grab a freeze frame from the 6K image and get a nice detailed shot that you can export as a JPEG, and all of a sudden you got a really nice still image. And if you manipulate break the 180-degree shutter rule and go with more like a 90 or 45-degree angle, you can have some nice crisp, you can find a nice crisp frame that you can just grab and export and send it up to either your Instagram, your social media page, or maybe you want to just save it for like an album or something. Low light. Low light blew me away. This was another feature that I was really, really concerned about, because of typically with larger sensors, when you're going with more when you go with a larger sensor, you go with higher resolutions, typically it introduces more noise. And there is more noise, but because of how it works, especially if you're working on a 4K timeline, this image actually suppresses the noise and makes it a lot more finer and makes it easier to clean up. And it's actually, this camera not only is good in low light as the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, I personally think it's better in low light than the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. It's not a big difference, but you definitely notice the difference in terms of low light performance. And the Pocket 4K, by the way, is still considered to me one of the great low light cameras. Not just not necessarily in terms of ISO to noise performance, but just purely on the flexibility you have in underlit situations, and also maintaining the color, which is not something most cameras can do. The Canon C200 certainly can't do that in terms of maintaining like the look and color throughout the ISO. This is such a wonderful beast of a camera that you can basically use for low light. Dynamic range is slightly better, especially in the highlights. There's a little bit better roll off than the Pocket 4K. Overall, image quality is knocked out of the park, fantastic. So let's talk about workflow and media management. Let's go to media first. So this is where things can barely get a little tricky depending on you. It's definitely, obviously, being 6K, being higher resolution, being more frame rates at higher resolution. You go through memories quite more quickly than the Pocket 4K. Obviously, that makes sense. But it's not as bad as most people think, or as even I thought of. I actually filmed an entire reception shooting nothing but 6K RAW. The full sensor 6K RAW at Q5. I know a lot of people like to look at the constant bit rate, especially like if they want sort of like a long format, they'll look at 12:1. I personally think Q5 is a better overall. If you want to try to go as long as you can, Q5 is better. As long as you're exposing correctly, Q5 will actually save you much more in media storage than constant bitrate 12:1, and keep the you actually keep the quality throughout as you're recording. But I did an entire wedding, not a wedding, the reception. I shot the entire reception in 6K RAW, uh, and I was amazed that I was able to get through it. I was using my CFast 2.0 card, which is a 512 gigabyte CFast card, and honestly, I filmed the entire weddings again 6K RAW. I didn't even fill up the card. I think I may have filled up half of it, so about, I guess, 256, about 256 gigs on an of 6K RAW, filming the entire reception. Awesome. Now, James, y'all probably like, really? You filmed a wedding in RAW? Why? Why would you do that to yourself? Well, for multiple reasons. One, the ability to be able to make sure somebody didn't change the white balance, or didn't get the or needed to adjust their exposures correctly. You have the ability to manipulate it and get the white balance and the exposure roughly closer using the metadata from RAW. So all your cameras can line up and be exactly the same, especially with the white balance. That's one of the things that's always bugged me, especially if I'm working with multiple people. Somebody will definitely not adjust their white balance. Even though we have communicated, somebody will probably forget to adjust the white balance. And all of a sudden I got an image that should be at like around 3200, and instead it's at like 4300 Kelvin. So having the ability to just go ahead and fix that in post, go ahead, get the proper temperature, the proper tint, and have them all be similar, that is such a great tool to have. The 2.8K slow motion option, I love it. I love the fact there's so much more details. I love that I can use at 120 frames per second. Yes, it is cropped in, but honestly, as long as you know the crop, which is, I believe, at that point, it's a pretty decent crop. I think it's like a 3x crop. So yeah, a relatively decent crop. But as long as you use the right lens, it's something that you could definitely work with, no problem. But this is one of the areas in terms of codecs. I do really, really hope that Blackmagic puts a ProRes option in here, because I personally think having ProRes in 2.8K and the 120 frames per second, that will be killer in this camera. And I personally think that's something in a firmware update I truly do believe that they can put in the camera. Because it's not burning through as much data as something like 6K. I want to just go into post workflow, and which is the fact that honestly, there is a little bit of latency in terms of playing the clip at full resolution, but once you drop the half resolution, it plays smoothly. And then if you're scrubbing through in Resolve, no issues. I haven't had any issues, which goes to show I gotta commend Blackmagic so much for what they're doing with Blackmagic RAW. They're not just going out and just giving you the same features on every other camera. They are actually taking this RAW codec and actually pushing their limits of their cameras. And I love the fact they do it, and they're doing it in unique ways. With this camera, they're doing it with resolution. With the Ursa Mini G2, they're doing it with frame rates, where you can do 150 frames per second in 4K, 300 frames per second in HD. You know, they're really taking this new Blackmagic RAW codec that they have and pushing the boundaries of what is possible with the codec. And I love the fact that they're doing that, because it gives so much creativity to us as content creators, as cinematographers and directors, to really focus more on our storytelling and telling our story the best way possible. Color science is still the same. Workflow, again, is pretty much not too bad for me. It may be a little bit different for you, but for me, in my laptop, I can edit completely on my laptop 6K RAW footage. I can't believe I'm actually saying that. I am editing 6K RAW footage on my laptop. That is amazing. Now let's go to some of the negatives. But first I want to start with the negatives, or what I call the fake negatives. First one is the crop factor. And this is people who've been talking about it compared to the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. The fact that you can use an XL speed booster and get a larger field of view on the 4K than you do with this camera. So that's sort of, a lot of people sort of been putting a ding at that. I counter that by saying that's true only for now, and that's because there is a company called Luca Adapter who is building a focal reducer, an in-mount focal reducer to the Pocket 6K, where it will turn it, if it works just like it does with the Ursa Mini Pro and the Ursa Mini 4.6K, it will turn this camera into a true 35mm full frame camera. Now, there is some downsides to that. It's pretty much a permanent fix, and you have to install it inside the mount right on top of the sensor yourself. I'll go into that more comparing to the Pocket 4K, but that is something that you need to worry about. If full frame field of view is what you're looking for, there is a possibility to get that full frame field of view in 6K from Blackmagic with this adapter. The battery life, you got to get an external mount and all these accessories, but that is something that at this point you should expect with Blackmagic. These are things that you should expect with Blackmagic. No autofocus, no IBIS. Again, IBIS, the most overrated feature of terms of video cameras in the past 10 years. Don't need it. The only downside and negatives is the fact that you do have to manage your media a little bit better. You will be going through your cards a lot more than normal, so you have to sort of adjust to that. In regards to something like a wedding, you may want to stick to ProRes, especially if you're filming all day, or you're going to go with the least compression option of Blackmagic RAW, which is Q5, and exposed correctly, then you could probably get through maybe a terabyte of footage. So the final negative, I guess, would be the mounts. A lot of people complain that why would you go with the EF mounts and you didn't go with an RF mount. I know that was, I believe, Caleb from DSLR Video Shooters. That was his feel is the biggest negative of the camera and the biggest drawback of the camera. They did, to me, make a mistake, but it's not in the mount. It's not taking advantage of the mounts. And that, to me, is the biggest mistake of this camera. I really wish they had taken advantage and put in some sort of, maybe something similar to what Canon did, which is a drop-in filter system where you can just slide an ND filter right into here, because there's all this extra space right here. There's all this extra space on the camera, and there's really no way, there's nothing to put in there. To me, that would have sealed it as the ultimate badass camera. If they just put that drop-in ND filter slot, similar to how Canon does with the EOS R, this would have been a dream camera. If they had put that in this camera, if they put an ND filter system, or at least some sort of drop-in ND filter system into this camera, I may have really seriously considered giving up my C200. Right now, I'm not considering giving up my C200. I'm only going to give up either the Pocket 4K or the Pocket 6K. So, to be determined about that. For the longest time, I was like, the Pocket 4K was a nice, definitely groundbreaking, huge, successful camera, but I didn't think it tested any of the waters of the higher end cameras because one of its sensor size, but also because of still being only 4K, whereas a lot of the higher ends are moving to 6K and even 8K. This camera, on the other hand, challenges quite a lot of other cameras in the entire market, particularly Red. When you got a camera that shoots 6K, Super 35 with a dual gain system, has the ability to shoot high frame rates up in 2K, and they're able to shoot at 2.8K, something like the Gemini, it really comes into question. Like the Gemini, to me, has been the camera I've been eyeing and looking at, for a while. And this camera really has now made me give me cause to pause about a lot of Red's camera lineup. Not that, and let me be clear, not in terms of questioning their, their brand and their name recognition, not by any stretch, because the dynamic range of those Red cameras destroys the dynamic range of this camera. It's just facts. But in terms of the color science, the way it just naturally looks, the way that I can shoot 6K and I get all the flexibilities for $2,500. And I really want to just stress this out. This is a 6K camera that can shoot 12-bit RAW. 6K RAW for $2,500. I know a lot of people are looking about, there's so many people were questioning the value of this camera, saying, what is the purpose of this camera when you got something like this, the Pocket 4K, that's pretty much does almost everything that this camera does at roughly the same quality at almost half the price. So why would you go with a camera like this? I need to remind you guys about how many cameras that can do what this camera does. Let's look at the cameras that are in this same category, which is cameras that can shoot at least 6K RAW, 12-bit. The first one is from Kinfinity with the Mavel, the Kinfinity Mavel, which is a 6K Super 35 camera that can shoot Cinema DNG, but it doesn't have dual native ISO. It's just, like a typical cinema camera. That one is $8,000 body alone. The next one up is also from Kinfinity, the Mavel LF. A full frame 6K camera, which does have dual native ISO. And I got a chance to look at it. It's a beautiful camera. But that camera is $10,000 body alone. Again, these are the two cheapest options of comparing what this camera to. The two next cheapest options. The next one up would be, I guess, the Red Helium, body alone, which is the 8K, Super 35 sensor from Red. That one, body alone, is $25,000. $25,000 for only the brain. To rig it out, you're probably looking at around $40,000. Next camera up is the Canon C700 full frame, which is a full frame 6K camera, which, by the way, you can't record RAW internally. You can only record RAW when you buy an extra external codec, RAW recording codec. The body alone, which, by the way, again, you can't record 6K RAW. You can't even record 6K with it, but the body alone is $33,000 for the body. Not including the RAW recording options will allow you to record 6K RAW, which is like another $8,000 for the RAW recording option. And then you still need the viewfinder, which is another $8,000 to get that camera up and running. So you're talking about almost $50,000 to just get that camera up that shoots 4K, that shoots 6K RAW. Next one up from that is the Sony Venice. Same problem with the Canon. You can't record RAW, the 6K RAW internally. You have to go to a RAW recording option, which you have to buy externally. The body alone of the Sony Venice is like $42,000, and then you gotta buy the RAW external recording option. So that's more money that you have to buy. And then the next option is the Red Monstro, which is an 8K full frame camera, and that body alone is $50,000. Understand that. That's where this camera sits with all those. When you start complaining about the doubling the price of this camera, think about what other cameras this camera is actually being compared to and actually being looked at. It is cameras that are worth 5, 10, 15 times its asking price. So when you're looking at those cameras, it's really, really hard to look at this camera and not be able to beat it. The Pocket 6K is probably one of my favorite video cameras I have ever filmed with. I love this camera to death. I got a very tough decision because at the end of the day, one of these cameras has to go. The Pocket 4K or the Pocket 6K. I will let you know in my comparison videos. But in the meantime, thank you guys for listening to me. I was hoping this would be short, but it didn't end up being short, as always. But thank you guys for watching. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. And until next time, take care, everyone.